Sometime around 12 months ago, one of my very first videos on this channel was how to clean your pint of 3. Now, as you can imagine, most of you already know I've got 4 pinters. 3 of them I work systematically 24/7 over the duration of 12 months. I've put extract kits through there, pint of fresh press, all grain recipes, the lot. So they've been worked very hard. We've got through many different brews. After this 12-month period, of course, I now have additional tips and tricks that I would like to pass on to you guys when it comes to cleaning your pint of 3. I think there's going to be something in here for everyone. Cleaning my pint of 3, I only use 3 simple things, and that is a soft cloth, some washing up liquid, and I like to use a brush. This is a 3cm circular brush, but any brush that you have handy laying around the house or in your garage will suffice nicely. So there you have it. This is the pinter in question today. It's ready to be cleaned. Let's get on with it. Okay, so first off, I like to take my pinter and remove the hop port cap, just so I can get this out of the way and ready for flushing the hot pot later on. When you take this cap off, you can pop the inside out, turn it around, which makes this twice the length, and that is then in, if you like, maintenance mode. So if you screw it in when it's in the longer variant, it will actually press the valve and open up the valve. So we will use that later when we're at the point of cleaning this to flush the hot port. But for now, we will just set that aside, ready for when we need it. The next thing that we need to do is depressurize the vessel. We want to make sure that all the pressure is out of the pinter, and to do that we just turn the pressure dial to the off position. So that's it. Any final pressure that was left in there is now gone. It's important to do that because removing the vacuum in here as well by letting the pressure out actually makes unscrewing the cap easier. Now, I want to raise a point about unscrewing these main caps because I've had this question from quite a few people, and that is they struggle with unscrewing the cap because the sticky residue inside the pinter tends to lock it down a little. Now, in the past, and I've always recommended, don't force things on the pinter. If you've got a stiff dock, don't force it. If you've got a stiff tap, don't force it, because forcing things generally can result in damage. In this instance, unscrewing this, it's relative. What is a stiff cap? What is a stuck cap? If you're a 6'4" male and you are 18 stone and you're a bodybuilder, this is not going to be a stuck cap. You're going to open it, no problem whatsoever. But if you're a 79-year-old retired gentleman, then this could be problematic. So stuck cap is relative to who you are and how much strength you've got. I appreciate that. And there is, don't make any mistake. There's a lot of retired guys, and no doubt I will absolutely be one of them, that go, they brew right into late retirement. They love it. It's a fantastic hobby. And of course, when you're in your 70s, late 70s, 80s, maybe even early 90s, although personally I don't know anybody 90 plus that is still brewing in a pinter, but definitely 80s, yes. It's just human nature that you've not got the strength at that age that you did have when you were 30 years younger. So I appreciate that for some, unscrewing this is problematic. I'm going to give you a resolution for that, now. So pressure's out, the valve is still in the off position, and what I'm going to recommend you do is put the pinter on its side so that the wedge is facing away from you, and then that is going to be that is going to offer counter resistance when we turn the cap. Now, the actual opening of the cap, I would suggest that you just get a length of wood, any old piece of wood that you can find. You know, you might have something like this laying around in your garage, or go and purchase a piece from the local DIY store. You know, it won't cost you much at all. And obviously we're going to use this as leverage. Now, if you don't struggle to open these caps, of course, then by all means, you know, just hold your pinter in the actual horizontal position and unscrew it, or over your sink and unscrew it. That's fine. But if you do have difficulties, then just pop your piece of wood in here for leverage. Put your hand on this, which is going to offer counter resistance. You know, make sure the pinter's secure, and that's it. You know, easy as that. So, you know, that's just a little tip there, that if you do have difficulty with this, you know, don't struggle with it. Take the skin off your knuckles, cause yourself injury. You know, just set yourself up in this manner, and it's going to be very easy to get that unscrewed. Now we have this cap loosened off, I'm going to just pop the pinter around the other way, put the valve in number 5, which will close it off and stop any leakage, and I'll just turn it back up to the vertical position to finish taking the cap off. First thing you want to do when you take this cap off is ask yourself the question, and that is, where is the O-ring? You want to look inside here and see if the O-ring has stuck to the actual plastic shroud here, or is it still in situ in the pinter cap. In this instance, it's quite rare because most times that O-ring actually pops out, but in this instance the O-ring is still in place, so that's fine. That's just a mental note. When you unscrew the lid and you take it off, ask yourself that question, where's the O-ring? Is it still in the cap, or is it stuck to the actual plastic rim itself? So we'll put this lid aside. The fact that that O-ring is still in the lid, I don't recommend prizing it out. It's very difficult to get that out. If it's still in the lid, if it's still in the cap, that's fine. We'll wash that in situ, we'll clean it out, and it will be fine. But if it does come out, then of course we'll clean it separately and replace it at the end of cleaning the pinter. So we've got the situation now where, you know, they've got the remnant bruise inside here that needs tipping away. So I'll just get rid of the dregs, rinse that down. Now the first thing I tend to do, just to get the worst of it out, is just half fill the pinter with hot water. That will do, and I'll give it a swirl. Just to get the worst of it out. And when you look inside your pinter, you'll always find like a crusty edge. The worst of it is pretty much where this band is, the edge of crust that's stuck inside to the fermentation vessel around this area inside, which is caused by the foam when it's fermentation. Where the beer line is, the foam above the beer line tends to stick with the yeast, tends to stick to the side and cause this crusty line. So that's the worst part that needs to be cleaned inside your pinter. So with the valve still in the number 5 position, so it won't leak here, what I'm going to suggest now is you put a squirt of washing up liquid, fill your pinter up to the fill line, And now we're going to let that rest. We're going to let the detergent do its work. The washing up liquid, the detergent is going to dissolve and break down all the organic matter that is inside there. This is, you know, a theme of mine, and that is a little bit of patience goes a long way. So we will give this a good 5 minutes soak in hot water to break down all the matter inside, and it's going to make it a breeze to actually get this cleaned up. Whereas if you rush into it and you're trying to scrape it off dry, you know, you're making work hard for yourself that is unnecessary. So, you know, let's do it the easy way, and we'll let the detergent do the hard work for us. So I will come back in 5 minutes and resume. So there you have it. This has been soaking now for 5 minutes. I'm going to get my soft cloth, check that the water's not too hot. This water's fine, you know, it's not about to burn anybody. And I just put the cloth in, and I like to use a cloth. I can actually feel through the cloth. I can feel with my fingertips where any, if you like, residual crust is on the bottom edge there. And so I can actually concentrate the area with my fingertips, rubbing it off. But once you've had this soak for 5 minutes in, you know, the detergent, it just comes off so easy. It's unbelievable. You know, I feel it with my fingertips. I just gently turn the pint around, if you like, scrubbing up and down with the soft cloth through my fingers. Once that crusty edge is all off, I tend to go down to the protrusions from the valves at the bottom. You'll feel the biggest one, which is your hopping port, as it protrudes inside the vessel. Then you'll feel a small protrusion next to that, which is the internal side of your pressure valve that you regulate. And then you'll feel a second one, which is actually a fail-safe pressure relief valve that you cannot see. It's under the casing of your Pinter 3. So should anything ever go wrong with your main pressure control valve, the fail-safe valve will kick in and release excess pressure to prevent the pinter getting to a pressured state that would be considered dangerous or a threat to damaging the vessel. So just using a soft cloth and working it with your hands, I work my way through them valves, cleaning them, all those protrusions, and feel around the base of the fermentation vessel, just gently wiping it all down. And then I start to work around, just going up and down with the soft cloth, up and down the entire wall of the vessel. Now that's the preliminary wash over. That's just to get the worst of it. I mean, that, to be honest, that's already 95%. You know, that's just to get the worst of it. And now we're going to look at removing the tap. But before we do, I want to use this residual hot water with detergent to give the tap a little flush. Now, I'm happy, I don't put the cap back on for this. I'm happy to just up the pinter until the water tips out. You don't have to follow this like for like if you've got a preferred variation to this. But basically, I'm happy to just tip the water out. It will still be level and above the tap. Then I'll connect the tap. And with this open, with no lid on, you see, it won't create a vacuum, so the tap will flow freely. And I'll just give that a good flush. I'll give it a good 10 or 20 seconds just to let that detergent get the worst of the beer from the inner workings of the tap. Okay, that should be fine. Now I'll empty the rest of the water. Now we will move on to the removal of the tap. First thing I do when I'm removing the tap is make sure it's nice and dry, because of course if it's slippy it makes the job more difficult. So I'll just get a paper towel and dry it off. Now I tend to just use my two thumbs, my two fingers at the back, overlap my thumbs like this, cross my thumbs, pinch and undo it. Now you can see how easy that was. If you follow my guide at the end of this video, how to insert your tap and fit it back in, this tap should never be super difficult to undo. You know, if you don't over tighten it, and essentially if you lubricate it with food grade grease, which I'll show you at the end, you know, this will never be an issue. But I do want to point out that again, that some people at times will over tighten this and they won't be able to unscrew it. If that's the case, you can use a tool that looks like this. I already had this. I didn't buy this for this purpose. I already had this. It's a plumbing tool, and you know, I do sort of like DIY plumbing, so I already had this. But if you really get this stuck and you absolutely cannot unscrew it at any point in your brewing process with your pinter, then you can purchase one of these tools whereby you just do the strap up like this, and when you leverage this against, it tightens the strap, and then you can, you know, force the tap undone. But as I say, if you get stuck, you know, that's the tool for the job. But if you follow my guide, you won't be over tightening this, and unscrewing this will never be a problem. But we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. So now we'll just unscrew the tap all the way and remove it from the pinter and set it aside. I'll just rinse the worst of that off. We'll set it aside next to the cap. Now we'll put the pinter back in the sink and we'll move on now to second stage of cleaning. Okay, for the second stage, we're going to rerun another batch of detergent. This time I want you to focus on the actual edges of the lid where it screws in and the threaded piece of the tap. So I tend to get the cloth inside, make sure it's nice and wet, and I like to push it from the inside out through this aperture of the tap, if you like, just to make sure that the inside of that is clean. And then I'll work my way around. Give them a good wipe down. Then I'll put the cloth bunched up like that. Now that the tap's out, I'll go around the inner edge again. Just underneath that collar, I'll give it a good wipe. then I'll go up and down all the sides again. Now that we're using clean detergent, final check on the bottom, run the cloth all around the bottom and the 3 raised valve covers or apertures if you like. Okay, so we're happy with that now. That essentially is cleaned, ready for rinsing. So what we need to do now is flush the valves before we move on to rinse. So to do this, we'll start with we'll turn it around this way so that the wedged part is at the back, and we'll open the valve to the off position, which is fully open. Because the cap is off, there will not be a vacuum effect, and that will allow the water to run clear. And we'll give that, give it a good 10 or 20 seconds to get that valve flushed. Any sticky residue that is up on the inside or the out, cleaned and rinsed away. Okay, so we're happy with that. We'll turn the valve back to number 5. Now we'll get the cap, the hopper port cap, in the long position. Should be able to turn this up somewhat and show you. Once we screw this in here in the long position, you'll feel the resistance. It starts to open the valve. Now that valve, I want you to give it a real good flush. When your pinter's new, you don't really have any problem with that valve seating or being airtight, gas tight. But as you've used these pinters over and over and over, these hopping port valves need a real good flush. You want them nice and clean so that the seal is gas tight. So there you go, most of the water now has been exited through the hopping port. And the final bit that's left, I'll just give it a swirl. Little rinse through the tap. At this point, I will put the pinter down this way, get the cloth, put my finger inside it, give it inside all the threads of the hopping port a good wipe down so that all them threads are nice and clean. Now it's time to rinse. So we'll switch over to the cold tap. It's about half full. Give it a good swirl. Start with the tap port. Back up on the side. For the second cold rinse, we'll open the valve again to the off position, just to rinse out any of the suds away from the detergent. That is fine. And then the hopping port again. Screw the plug back in. Quick quick rinse. And then one final swirl. Now at this point, I'm going to just set the pinter on the side here, get my cloth, give the case a good wipe down. Okay, that's the cleaning of the main vessel complete. There's one further thing that I want to point out here, and that is when you come to wash your pinter, you've basically got an inner fermentation vessel and then the actual shell of your pinter on the outside. When you wash your pinter, it's inevitable that at some time water will run through the gaps and it will get trapped in between the outer shell and the inner fermentation vessel. Now, Pinter's resolution to this, if you look at the diagram on the screen now, is to remove the bottom right hand rubber foot. You can actually see that there's a little indentation there where you can get like a flat bladed screwdriver in to pop the foot out, and any water that's trapped can be poured away. In this instance, there's no water trapped in there, but you'll hear it. If you tip your pinter up and there's nothing coming out, but you shake it and you can hear water, then it's trapped in the case and you'll need to take that rubber foot out. Now, this no doubt is an afterthought from a previous pinter design, the Pinter 2. The Pinter 2 didn't have removable rubber feet like this. Once they had created the pinter, if you like, the style of it, the actual casting of this, they obviously couldn't modify this substantially. All they've done is made the rubber foot removable. Whereas in an ideal world, they would have created a circular rubber foot, allowing the hole to still run through the center. Because then, of course, you wouldn't need to pop the rubber foot out. You'd have the rubber foot there all the time, but it would also allow any trapped water to drain off automatically without having to mess about at all. Now, you might have noticed, no doubt, that I have no rubber feet in this pinter, or in fact, I don't have rubber feet in any of my pinters. I have taken the rubber feet out and threw them away. I'm a very functional person. It's like the face plates, the plastic face plates that go on the front of these. They, most of the time, they don't stay in place, they fall off, and they play no functional part in brewing. You know, for me, I'm not trying to have something that looks nice. You know, I'm not interested in that. I want functionality. I want fantastic beer. So for me, the face plates, they just go in the bin. You know, they're no use to me. And the rubber feet, I don't want to keep popping it out to let water out and putting it back in and popping it out, putting it back in. So I just take all four out and I put them in the bin. For me personally, I don't need rubber feet. Once this is in condition, this is conditioning that way, then it goes straight into my fridge and it stays in my fridge while I'm tapping. So you know, what do I need rubber feet for? I don't. Now the other thing is, why I take all four out is because after I've washed my pinter, when I move on to the component parts, which are sitting on the back here, the tap and the lid, I can set my pinter now in this position, and any water inside will run out of them four holes. Now I'll tell you another important thing, and it's another reason why I leave them feet off altogether. you imagine if you've got your 4 rubber feet on there and you've got water trapped in, you can hear it slushing around. You take the foot off, you pour it away, you put your rubber foot back in. At that point, you've let the water out, but you've got a lot of damp in there now. And that damp, if it doesn't dry off effectively, you can actually start to get mold growth inside. It won't affect your beer, won't affect your brew at all, because it's not inside your fermentation vessel. It's in between the fermentation vessel and this shell. But nonetheless, you don't want mold growing in there. It's not ideal, is it? And what you can find is, and I've seen this in numerous Pinter 3s, you know, this was a topic of discussion, and that is the mold. You'll know when you've got it because you can actually start to see the mold growing from underneath this rubber band. You'll see mold growth here, and you can wipe that down as much as you like, but once the mold starts and gets a hold, you will actually see it around the edge of your band. That is why, for me personally, I prefer to take all my rubber feet out and leave them out. So when I finish washing my pinter, I can pop it like that for 5 minutes while I'm doing the component parts. And also when it goes into fermentation in this position, the air is allowed to get in there, dry it all off, and prevent mold growth ever occurring. So this pinter is now washed, cleaned, rinsed, happy. If we look inside here, you know, it smells perfect, and you know, hopefully you'll be able to get a view of that, but it's literally spotlessly clean. You know, it's shimmering with cleanliness. It's perfectly fine. So that is good to go now, and we will now move on to looking at cleaning the component parts. When it comes to cleaning the component parts of your Pinter 3, you basically have the tap, comes in 2 parts. You've got the tap unit itself, and this is what they call the yeast guard, and that just pulls off, disconnects there. So you've got the yeast guard and the tap. Then you've got the main screw cap, and that comes with like a conical insert there, which helps direct and drive the waste, the spent yeast, the trub if you like, into the docking station when it's connected. That just detaches by pulling it off. The main cap itself, and then of course you've got the O-ring, which is there, my finger's pointing to it now, and it goes right around the whole circumference of the inner lid, and that is what makes it watertight, if you like, or beer tight in our instance. So your O-ring will look something like this. To be honest, obviously this one's white. This is a food grade O-ring. The one inside here, I would like to think it's food grade, but it is black. So this is what it will look like, something like this. It would have been nice if the O-ring had popped out for this video. 9 out of 10 times the O-ring sticks to the lip of your pinter and it comes out. And it would have been nice to show you that and all 5 component parts. But, you know, sod's law, it's very typical and it's very indicative of life in general that these things happen. You know, the one time that you want the O-ring to pop out, it stays in the cap and you get like a motorbike burning down the street. So these are the sort of things that we have to deal with in life though. But, you know, as I say, the show must go on. So I'll just have to give you, this as an example, and there's the 2 things that you need to look at. Just be mindful of it. Just if the O-ring doesn't stick to the lip of your pinter, just be sure that it is still in place inside the cap in this circumference on the inner rim. And if it is, that's fine, you've got nothing to worry about. But if it pops out, that will be another part, and that will be washed and inserted back in after it's been cleaned. And I'll briefly talk you through that when we get there. So at this point, when you separate the component parts, I want you to mentally think of this as a high five. You want to be giving yourself a high five. You want to be seeing 5 component parts. Mentally, you want to be aware of those 5 component parts: the tap, the yeast guard, the conical insert, the main cap, and your O-ring, which is either going to be still in situ inside the main cap or separated on the side. So when you come to do this or put your pinter back together, always remember that in the back of your head. High five. 5 component parts that you want to see. 5 component parts are going to go in the sink for cleaning. 5 component parts are going to come back out of the sink to be reassembled. So now I'll get this sink filled and we will progress with the cleaning of these essential parts. So I have half filled the sink now with warm soapy water with the washing up liquid detergent, and I'll put these parts in, submerge them in the water. I won't put the example O-ring in, of course, because that won't be necessary, because we know that the O-ring is still in situ in the cap. So you know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to give these 5 minutes to soak, let the detergent do its work and loosen up all that material to make this cleaning process simplicity itself. Okay, the 5 minutes is now up. We're now going to get the brush into action. I like to start with the smaller parts. So for example, if the O-ring was loose in here, I would take the O-ring and just, run it. I'd spin it in between my fingers, run it in between my fingers. It's very simple to clean the O-ring. Give it a quick rinse off with cold water. Put that aside. That's done. The second thing I would look at is the yeast guard. I tend to just give this a quick, stick my finger in there, give it a quick brush down. These are very simple to clean, these. The dirt doesn't seem to stick to them very badly at all. Give it a shake, and then I just basically put my finger inside. And that is it, very simple, very easy to get that clean. The material that it's made out is the sort that the waste doesn't really stick to it very aggressively, and it's very simple to get that sparkling clean. So once you've given it a quick rinse in cold water, set it aside, that's done. Next step, I would go for the conical insert. As I say, it's just nice to get the simple things out of the way first, to give yourself more working space in your sink. Just use your common sense to brush the inner rim of this. Just go over the whole component part methodically, brushing it down, making sure that it's nice and clean. Same thing, this is very simple. Quick rinse off. So there you go. High five, 2 out of 3 are done. Would be 3 out of 3 if the O-ring wasn't inside the cap. We'll leave the cap for last because that's the most substantial part to clean. So we'll go for the tap next. I like to use the brush to methodically work over all parts of the tap. Your tap O-ring is here. Make sure that you give that a good clean. There's no particular or specific method for this. Just make sure that you get your brush in all the gaps, all the crevices. Get your tap unit looking sparkling clean. don't forget when we clean these, it's the cleanliness that we're looking for now. We want them nice and clean, so when it comes to sanitization, they'll be finished off there and they will be ready for the brewing process without any concerns at all. What we'll do now is just get a handle, pop it on the tap just to get any, basically we just wanted to flush this out. We've given it a flush when it was in the pinter earlier with the detergent, but now we're looking to just rinse out any detergent that we may have got in there while cleaning. So I'll give it a flush down with hot water, open up the tap like this, that's fine. Quick rinse off with cold water, job done. That's your tap. So now we're moving on to the cap. You no doubt already know that this device, as it engages with the docking station, triggers this. I've covered this obviously in my old video, and it's simply the case of pushing this open to get the valve clean inside this rim. That's the trick here. Now, I personally find that using my two thumbs to push that valve open and just swilling it in the water like this and pumping it up and down like this, I do this multiple times, but I've always found that sufficient in detergent after you've soaked it to get that spotlessly clean. The rest of the device I'm going to clean with the brush. But what I would say is, if you look at this and you see a load of like crud inside and you can't quite get it all gone from this, then there is another option, and that is to get your docking station and actually connect your lid to your dock, and your dock is going to hold that device open for you. It's going to hold the valve open for you, and then at that point you can get your brush in there. You don't need to use your thumbs, and you can brush this. You can go around it and brush it perfectly clean in your own time without struggling to hold the valve open. But what I would say is that I don't find this necessary. It's not something that I do myself. I honestly do find that just pressing the valve open with my thumbs and agitating it in the water can get that spotlessly clean. So coming back to the rest of the cap, get my brush, go over the whole device methodically. And when you're looking at the inside here, the brush is really useful for getting this O-ring clean, and these, if you like, apertures here, in the corners of here, that's where the actual, the residual trub dries off, gets stuck. That's where this brush is really earning its keep. That's where you get a brush in there, it really can clean out these crevices in a way that a cloth or water alone just can't do. So go around each unit, the thread. I mean, this is common sense, to be honest. Just what we're looking at here is just using your brush to thoroughly and properly clean every part of this cap. It plays a very important process, and I'd say that this is probably the thing that you're most likely not to get cleaned properly if you're not cautious. You want to keep an eye on that. you literally want it gleaming. So a final check on this. As I go up and down, you see the water flushes through the valve, and as you go round and round, it rinses away that. You can see it's spotlessly clean. Give it a quick rinse, pop the valve open. That's beautifully clean now. Final rinse in cold, and that's it. As it comes out of the sink, check your component parts. The main cap, the O-ring is 2, the conical is 3, the tap is 4, the yeast guard is 5. Give yourself a high five, empty your sink, get ready to reassemble your pinter. So when it comes to reassembling these parts, I'll give them a quick dry off. Just with a dishcloth, nothing excessive, just a basic wiping over. Line up the yeast guard, pop it back on. Line up the conical insert, push it back into place. So that cap now is, ready for when we go on to the sanitization process before you're ready for the pinter. I will quickly cover now, inserting the tap back into your pinter 3. How I go about this is get a paper towel, make sure that the O-ring on your tap is dried off, and I just get the paper towel inside the collar where the tap is going to be inserted, dry it off a little, get some food grade grease, just to tap my finger on that, just the smallest amount, then I pop it on the O-ring of the tap, spin the tap around so that it's covered. You can see, I've mentioned this before, but these O-rings push against the inner edge of this actual insert here. So over tightening this, it's not like it's a flat O-ring on the edge, and the more you tighten, it's tightening up against a flat rubber ring, a rubber washer. It's not designed like that. The actual seal is between the O-ring and the inner edge, so over tightening it seems pretty pointless. What you want to do is just get your pouring spout, if you like, line it up as best you can central, push your tap in first all the way down, screw your collar up. First of all, just screw this up and finger tight until it stops. If you're concerned that this is slippy, wipe the collar down, because it makes a big difference. If you've got like residual water on this collar, it's a lot more difficult to screw in. So when you get this down, you've done it finger tight with one hand, then I just cross my fingers at the back, cross my 2 thumbs if you like, use my thumbs at the front, and I just give it one final pinch. That's it. That's done. If you follow this procedure, the maintenance on your tap, it means that when you actually come to remove this tap, you can undo the collar, no problems whatsoever, and remove the tap, without force. So there's no force putting the tap in, there's no force getting it out, no problem doing it up or undoing it. Makes life easy for you. and it maintains your pinter for longevity then as well. So this pinter now is ready, all apart from reinserting this cap. Now this cap, you can give it a rinse down, dry it off. Be sure to take the inside back out, because that's, like I mentioned before, that's in its long position, and then you pop it out, turn it around, pop it back in the short position. Now I'll be honest, you can't make a mistake on this, because you will feel it. If you've got it in the wrong position, in the long position, you can absolutely feel it hit the valve and open the valve up. So you're not going to make a mistake. But, you know, common sense, just look at that, make sure it's the right way around, screw it in. These as well, certainly if you use a hopper, these can get stickier and actually very tight. So same thing here. You know, this is not doing anything, it's just a blanking cap, you know, it's just to keep it clean. So when you actually do this up like this, you know, just, that's it. As soon as it touches, that's it. You know, you tightening it up is pointless, because if it gets stickier, it'll get stuck. And then when you do come to apply a hopper, or you come to wash your pinter, you won't be able to undo it. So it needs no tension on that at all. You know, literally just as soft as, finger tight soft as you want, and that's it, it's done. So the pinter now is ready to go. You know, this now, as soon as it's ready for sanitization, this pinter, of course, then is going to be sanitized to another level. You know, it's going to be totally cleaned through and ready for the brewing process. And as it is now, it's spotlessly clean, ready to go. I tend not to put the cap on. I'll just go and store this. I tend to store mine, you know, in a plastic container, because I'll just let it drip. There's obviously going to be a bit of, you know, water perhaps dripping off of it as it dries. And, you know, if you don't want to get your carpets wet, just pop it inside a plastic container. Pop your lid inside the container as well. Let it all air dry. Unless, of course, you're ready to go straight into brewing. If you're ready to fire off again and get straight down to action, then you can now go straight into sanitization and move on to your brewing process. So there you go. That is the conclusion of this video. My very latest tips and tricks on cleaning your Pinter 3. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.